Welcome to this podcast of Serenity Nation. This is Pat LaRusso, and I am joined by my co-hosts, Lucas Ugenti and Anthony Sino. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey, how's it going, Pat? How's it going, Luke? Hope you guys had a good weekend.
Yeah, same old, man. Same old. Honestly, just starting to get back to reality here without hockey. It's kind of a weird feeling considering we had it every night nonstop. Actually, all day. I wouldn't even say every night. We had it pretty much all day for a pretty long time. Now it's getting weird without it.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. And thank God that Kyle Dubas and the Maple Leafs gave us something to talk about Friday night when it was announced that the Leafs had signed Joe Thornton on a one-year contract. Anthony, what was your initial thoughts on the signing?
In the very moment, I just got really excited. Once I heard that he was coming, and then immediately caught myself thinking oh no, what's the number, right? Because I think Friedman tweeted first, Thornton to Toronto's heating up, and then I think back to all the articles I read, and they're saying, 1 million, 1.5 million is the AAV you're gonna have to pay to get him. And I'm like, oh, you know what? Okay, 1.5, yes, cheaper than Kerfoot, but Kerfoot's a million years younger. And can you really trust Thornton to be your third line center? Because at 1.5, they would have had to probably make another move. And then the official announcement comes out from the league, from the Leafs, and it's 700K. And I'm like, all right, strap me in, let's go. I'm ready for the Jumbo Joe ride. And it's gonna be fantastic. I think that if when you watch his interviews that he's done over the past, the guy's just like a larger than life personality that Leafs Nation is going to appreciate, and not just for what he brings on the ice, but what he'll do to that locker room. And I can't say anything bad about the signing. Just looking at the AAV, the term, the type of player that Thornton is, the type of person that he is, it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, I don't think there really is anything bad to say about the signing. Just in terms of the player you're getting and at the price you're paying for that player. But I mean, at first when I heard, I wouldn't say I was shocked. I mean, I guess with the way the rumor mill swirls now, you kind of hear everything before it's going to happen, days before. So it was almost like I was prepared for it to happen. But I guess when it actually broke and, the Leafs Twitter put it out there, I guess I'll say I was shocked. And I guess I won't say I was shocked in the sense that I didn't believe it was happening. I was more or less just kind of like, all right, where's he going to fit in? Because I was looking at the roster and I'm just wondering, did Toronto need Joe Thornton? And at first I would say I would have been okay without him, but now digging a little deeper, I'm happy they made the call. I'm happy they made the signing. As Anthony said, 700K, you really can't go wrong. I mean, it's about as cheap as you can go, if not the cheapest you can go. And at the end of the day, man, the guy's a brilliant hockey player. He's been around forever. He's going to bring a ton to the room. Again, it was just more or less where was he going to fit, because I don't really see him having that big of a role in the top six. I do think that he could step in, when need be. Obviously, it's Joe Thornton, so he can play power play minutes if need be as well. But I don't know. Spezza there with Kerfoot there. It just, it was kind of like, what's going to happen next?
Yeah, no, I remember I was driving home Friday night when the initial announcement broke. I was listening to Overdrive with Michael Hayes and all those guys. And my initial reaction was, this is the exact intangibles that the three of us have been discussing since last season that the Leafs needed. He brings energy to the room. He's a wily vet who's going to bring some additional accountability to that dressing room. I think he'll be a great person for even a young coach like Sheldon Keefe to rely on. Because funny enough, Joe Thornton's actually a couple years older, I believe, than Sheldon Keefe. So there is that that element too. And
he's older than Dubas too. I know.
Yeah,
I think Keefe's actually younger than Dubas. So yeah, Joe's like the most senior person in the organization.
Yeah, it's
for sure, not including the scouts, obviously.
So not including some of the scouts
and Cliff Fletcher, who's gonna be there until he dies. But
yeah, so it is one of those things where, you know what, that level of experience, that a level of intangibles is something that this roster needed. I don't anticipate us getting 2005 Joe Thornton, but I would be happy with 2018 Joe Thornton. I think he
Yeah,
scored
really.
almost 20 goals and how many assists? Playing with LeBlanc on the third line. If we could get that production out of him on our third line, it beats what we had last year coming out of that third line with, Kapanen really not fitting in the top six, Johnson
Mhm.
kind of being in and out in the top six, really not producing. And I think I saw one set that between Kapanen and Johnson, all they scored last season was 21 goals. Like
Yeah.
we,
Yeah, they
we
did not contribute much. We
they did
didn't get value in those contracts last
no,
year, and I think that was like a big reason as to why they're gone. Is that it was a luxury to pay those guys $3 million.
yep.
But once the big four got their money, and like you can't pay for combined 6.9 million for what
For
they
21
brought.
goals.
Right?
Exactly.
Exactly.
21 goals. It's Kapanen
And
for
brought nothing else,
no,
sorry to interject, but brought nothing else. Like if they
no,
weren't scoring, they weren't really doing
they weren't
anything aside
producing.
from Kapanen,
Yep.
like the occasional fight once Clifford came. You saw that edge,
Yeah.
but like you that was just that wasn't that was the sorry, like the odd occasion with Kapanen, right? He wasn't bringing that kind of physicality every night, so
No.
it
And
No,
there
it
was
was only when he wanted to.
it
It was
made
only when he
sense.
had
Like
to.
in hindsight, it did make sense that those guys had to go. But yeah. So with that though, what do you guys think of kind of where Thornton can fill the gap as to what those guys brought? Because like it or not, yeah, they had an off year, but in the 18-19 season, Kapanen and Janssen both provided some value in our top nine, right? So I'm looking back to what you said, Pat, in terms of not last year's Joe Thornton, like the 2019-2020 season, the 18-19 season. He scored 51 points in 73 games. That's a 57-point pace on a good Sharks team that went to the conference final, if you guys remember correctly, right? So to me, if you get if you get 2/3 of that on your third line, like how do you not take that risk, right? Like you said, like I've seen all of our tweets about this signing so far. It is literally such little risk for just an absolute. No, I won't say a home run, but like a definitely a double or a triple, in a very very close game in to use the metaphor of like this cap, right? Like to get a 700 grand player that can provide just be a vocal leader in the room and kind of smack some guys in the ass when they need it, in terms of getting their compete level up. Guy who, by all accounts, is just a rink rat, and can provide that level of scoring that Kapanen and Janssen brought last year. It just it makes all the sense in the world. Like I know I'm trying to find reasons to not like it, and the only reason would be is that he gets injured, and then in that case, like if he's out for the season, okay, it's 700 grand. He goes on IR, and it literally is you wipe your hands of it and you're done, right? So I don't know what you guys have to say with that, but if you do have any other negatives, let me know, like, or any possible contingencies that you can see going on with this type of deal.
I wouldn't say I have a negative. Like you can't find anything negative to say about it. I guess I'm stuck on the roster because I don't. I think Pat was the one who mentioned it. He'd be a nice addition to the third line, but and again, maybe I just advocate for Kerfoot too much because of how much I like him, but I don't want to see him play on the wing because I don't think he can play the wing. Now I understand he has experience because he's able to play the wing, but that doesn't mean he's able to play it well.
Are you talking about Thornton or Kerfoot?
No, I'm talking about Thornton stepping in to play the third line center role and have Kerfoot pushed up to play at the wing at some point because I don't think they're going to move away from Kerfoot because I do
You don't
like his
think Kerfoot can
versatility.
play you don't think Kerfoot can play the wing?
No, like I
Oh,
don't.
I think
I don't.
okay.
Truthfully,
that's where I
I think
disagree.
he
I
disappears
think
on the
yeah,
wing.
well.
I think he can play the wing for sure. Like if I remember correctly, that point streak that Nylander was on, Pat, do you remember how many games it was? at some point. He was on like a 20-game point streak, Nylander. That was when Kerfoot and Tavares on his line. Like it was near the kind of beginning of the Keefe era, and it was like they kind of stacked the top six. Like, look, I'm not saying
I see what you're saying, but
the point is that we get flexibility.
A
The point is that we get flexibility. Oh
yeah,
yeah, I
right.
want.
You do get flexibility, but you have the same flexibility with Spezza. Like, it's not like you're bringing in Joe Thornton, you're bringing in the Messiah of centerman. Like, don't get me wrong, he's a great centerman, guys. Like, I 100% love the signing. All I'm saying is, if you push Joe Thornton into the third line center role, I genuinely believe Alex Kerfoot becomes a ghost. And I understand that, yeah, okay, maybe at the beginning of the year, William Nylander might have done okay with Kerfoot, but there was more times than not I was saying to myself, when Kerfoot was playing on the wing, where's Kerfoot? And I can remember vividly the amount of tweets that Leaf Nation put out saying Kerfoot cannot play on the wing. And it was almost evident that he can't play on the wing.
I think people were looking at that just with his point totals. Like, Kerfoot did not have a good year points wise. But I do think when you dig into it a little bit, he's a really good puck transporter, like through the neutral zone. So to your point, Luke, I do think that if he were to go, like, let's say that, let's just assume that they sign Mikheyev, right? And they lock in their top six with Mikheyev, Nylander, Tavares, and then you have or VC for it with that line, and then you got Hyman, Matthews, Marner, right? That third line, like, you have an abundance of options, right? You can do Kerfoot in the middle, Thornton on the wing, Simmons on the right wing, Barabanov. You got Spezza, you got Joey Anderson that they acquired for Janssen, right? Like, they have a bunch of different options. They got Engvall, Robertson, right? So there's a lot of guys that you can kind of blender together and mix. I do think that a Kerfoot Thornton pair on that third line could be really valuable. Whether you want to argue who should be the center or not, but because Thornton struggles with transporting the puck through the neutral zone, I think that's a spot that Kerfoot could help alleviate that pressure off Thornton, right? So where you turn a 200-foot sheet of ice for Thornton into like 170 feet of ice. You know what I mean? Where in the O zone, okay, maybe you have Thornton play down low below the dots where he can set up a guy like Simmons in front of the net or something like that. In the D zone, maybe Thornton has to play on the wing because you don't want him to get tired chasing the puck around through the D zone. So there's a lot of different ways that Keefe can attack this. But I don't think I'm going to go as far as you as saying that, like, oh, like, Kerfoot can't play the wing, so, like, we should just not bother trying it. Like, they're going to try it. Like, I don't think...
Well, obviously, I never said they were going to try it.
Okay,
I'm just saying,
okay.
I just don't think that, like the way people are talking about the Thornton acquisition, it was like he was going to come in and save the third line, as if the third line was really the problem. Okay. Like, realistically, the wingers were the problem on the third line because, again, and this could be me because I'm just into Kerfoot that much. I just think Kerfoot was more than okay in that position, and I think he's a really good centerman. And I think, as you were saying, transporting the puck, doing all the right things, I think Kerfoot does do that. So it's like you're bringing in Thornton. Okay, you're not going to play him on the second line. That doesn't make any sense. You're not going to play him on the first line. That makes absolutely no sense. And really, you can't really have Joe Thornton on the fourth line either. So it's like, where does he actually fit? I guess that's the point I'm trying to make, right?
I think it's the third, and I think depending on who the opponent is, that'll change. So if you're playing a bigger team that's bigger down the middle, then I don't mind having Matthews, Tavares, Thornton, Spezza down the middle. If it's
Matthews,
a faster
Tavares, Thornton,
right?
Spezza, okay, and then we're
absolutely.
And then it's a faster team. And
not then third line wing. He could play in the top six, Kerfoot, on the wing if you want him to.
I would put him on. I would put Kerfoot on the wing and allow and I would only play Thornton in the offensive zone to start. You know what I mean? Like,
that's what I was just about to say, Pat. If you look at his breakdown, you got to look at his breakdown. I'll give you his breakdown from last season, guys. Give me a second. So, all right. So his O-zone starts. So last season, Thornton had 116 offensive zone starts. He had 185 neutral zone starts and 93 defensive zone starts. So even a team as weak as the Sharks were trying to give him as much opportunity
Yeah, it's all
to
situational with him.
get in the it's all situational, right?
It's all
Like
situational.
isn't there? Can't you guys see a situation like how many times did we see at the end of a period or something like that where you got where Keefe would throw Tavares, Marner, and Matthews together, right? Like in an ozone start, trying to get a
Yeah.
goal or something like that, right? Like we know Keefe is not afraid to try these things, and the thing that has grown on me of him as a coach is that yes, the lines are get reported as they do in the pregame warm up, but once the game is going, right, like it's very fluid.
Very fluid.
So at that point, like there's definitely going to be a scenario where, like, to cite another stat, like Thornton was like in the 99th percentile of guys with shot assists last season in the NHL. So you have two centermen who are two of the best shooters in the game in Matthews and Tavares. What's stopping you from throwing Thornton on the wing with either Matthews or Tavares in an offensive zone start, and you have him playing that way, right? Like you have him in that role. I think that Thornton is going to fit in on the power play quite significantly. I think that he can add a different element to the Leafs power play that, you know what, they might need to consider not having all the big four forwards on one power play. I think that they need to reevaluate that because I do think that they became more predictable, and I think that that's going to change. Now, what do you guys think about his role there too?
On the power play?
Yeah, like where do you see him playing? Do you see him playing on the half wall? Do you see him playing in net front? And like, what are your units? Right? Like, there's a lot of different questions that need to be asked.
I would put him on. I would put him on the bumper spot. He's so good at distributing the puck.
Good idea.
I would put like a Barabanov and or a Simmons in front of the net. You know what I mean?
I would probably put Simmons, not
essentially-
Barabanov, but yeah.
Right? Like it would be Simmons or Barabanov or whoever they decide to put on the second power play. But you need a bigger body that can kind of act like a Hyman or even a Tavares / Nylander, right? So
Yeah.
I think you're going to need to do that. I think you're going to need to do that to be able to really cycle through the players on that roster and give them the. But I could see Joe being on the bumper spot.
But if you're gonna, so to your point, Pat, if you're going to put him on the bumper spot, like there's definitely a way where you can get Kerfoot, Spezza, Simmons, Thornton, and one of the defensemen as like that. I could see that being a second unit, right?
Yeah.
The only thing is though, is to me, like obviously we know the second unit's not going to play a lot, so like I guess it's not that big of a deal, but I could also see a scenario where maybe you take off like you take off a Nylander or a Tavares or even a Marner off that big the big gun unit and you put Thornton there too in situations, right? Like I think the moral of the story that I'm trying to say here is that the Leafs really need to start becoming more like opponent dependent in terms of the way that they deploy their lineup. And I think that's what made Tampa so good that the Leafs need to try and emulate is like they now have the type of players where I think that they could play and win and be successful in different styles of games and dictate the way that they want the game to be played. And I think that to Lucas's point earlier is that, like Kerfoot needs to be like the third line center. Like, yes, I agree with Kerfoot being there most of the time. It's just, I think that when they bring in a guy like a Barabanov, who's pretty versatile, a Mikheyev, a Thornton, a Simmons, like those guys are just like, they're so fluid and to me, very like replaceable talents and versatile that like there's nothing to say that the lineup can change every game, every 3 games. Like, you know what I mean? I think that's the moral of the story here and the options that Keefe has.
Yeah, that's the whole plus by having depth, right? Like this was something that the Leafs lacked last year, that if some guys weren't going, they still had a spot on the roster.
What
Where
the
I
Leafs
think
lacked
now,
last year is that their fourth line was supposed to as soon as they brought in Clifford, they thought that fourth line was going to be a banger line, and then Keefe
worked
never
out.
played them. Right? Keefe never played them. They played like less than 9 minutes a night. So how do you affect the game, right? Now, right? Like that's all the fourth line could have brought, and in very limited time. Now you could put a fourth line that's very skilled
Yeah,
out there, right? And
still
maybe you have
guys.
maybe you have a fourth line that's skilled, and the third line is the checking line with like a Kerfoot, a Simmons, and a Barabanov or a Mikheyev. You know what I mean? What do
Yeah.
you
But then
think
that
of
means
that, Luke?
Thornton has to go to the fourth line, and I don't think
All
Thornton
right,
should play
that's
on the fourth
fine.
line at all.
But I don't think when we say numbers like fourth line, right? I to me I don't want to think of it like that because that's just fourth. That's the fourth line listed on like the tweet that Shilton or Masters or Chris Johnson tweet out in the pregame warmup, right? Like the fourth line could be the fourth line on the depth chart, but they could get all the O-zone starts, and you give the Kerfoot line the D-zone starts
Yeah, but you're
because
not going to
that's
give them the fourth. You're not going to give the fourth line the ozone starts. If your
what's
third
why
line is
what's stopping
well,
you from doing that?
well, because if your third line is Kerfoot, let's just say your third line is Robinson, Kerfoot, Simmons. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Yeah,
You're
okay.
good, and let's just say
Very
Matthews
realistic.
just finished a minute shift. The second line just finished a minute shift before that. They just can't go out. You get an ozone start. You're going to throw out Spezza, Thornton, and Barbanov over the third line.
Well, that's up to Keefe. The line that you're saying with Robertson's, Kerfoot, and Simmons, right? To me, that's just as good of an offensive line as the Thornton line that you mentioned, right? But what happens if it's like ultimately we don't know who's going to end up being the good like checkers, right? In air quotes, right? So, but let's just assume for a moment, right? It's Barabanov, Simmons, and Kerfoot, right? That like to me that's a good hard to play against speed line, heavy line that can play the role that the Yanni Gord, the Coleman, and the Goudreau line played for Tampa, where they're just like hard to play against, ultra compete level, right? And they bring it every night. The guys that are just a pain in the ass to play against, those guys chew up your hard minutes, and then that leaves like a Thornton and a Spezza and whoever. I'm not sure who it is. Maybe it's Robertson. Maybe it's Engvall. I don't know. Maybe it's Mikheyev. You don't know. But that line is the line where it's okay. Ozone starts. Give him the easier minutes. Maybe they can create chances and hold possession of the puck. Right now, the way that I say it, I don't know if they're ever going to have Spezza and Thornton in the lineup at the same time. Right. What we haven't mentioned in this entire conversation is how the regular season is going to pan out. Right. We don't. It could. It's good. Is it going to be a 48 game schedule like a lockout year? Right? How many back-to-backs are those going to be, right? Maybe you don't want to like that again, right? We're assuming that all these guys have to be in the lineup at the same time. We don't know that yet, right? We also
And we don't know what was even discussed, right? Like we don't know what was
Sorry?
promised to Like we don't know what was promised to Spezza. We don't know what's promised to Thornton. You know, if it is a condensed schedule, you know, are we looking at maybe a platoon of Spezza, Thornton, you know, on the third line, and then
Exactly.
kind of just rotate through? Like it just, I really like the fact that this roster for the first time in a long time has that versatility, and we're able to have these conversations. Because in the past, even if you weren't playing, you knew you had a roster spot.
Yeah, that's the thing. It creates internal competition.
Yeah,
Last year
it drives the work ethic.
we never even had to have a conversation about line combinations last year. We knew who was playing. The
Yeah.
only thing that would change is who's playing right wing on the fourth line or left wing on the fourth line. We knew it was Gauthier and Spezza, and then it was either Malgin or Engvall as the guy alternating in and out, right? The third line was Mikheyev, Kerfoot, and Mikheyev, Kerfoot, and Kapanen, right? And then you had Janssen, like the top six was what it was, right? Now there's a lot of different things, and I think like if we're trying to read between the lines here, and I know we're not a Marley's podcast here, but I think that all these moves, like I just realized, guys, we haven't even mentioned Jimmy Vesey, who Dubas was quoted saying that he's the BC's going to get a chance in the top six, right?
Right.
And with him saying that, and we know that the Harvard connection, Vesey and Kerfoot played on the same line at Harvard, like we didn't even mention that pair. right? But I think that speaks to the fact that, well, like, is there an AHL? Is the AHL going to be playing, or are they going to have to do a taxi squad, right? Kind of thing, like in fantasy football, right? Where the games are so compact, they might. What are the cap ramifications? Maybe your taxi squad doesn't count for the cap, or maybe they raise it a little bit, like kind of like uh, a like a fake cap kind of thing, like where they raise it to like 83 or 84 million in terms of like AAV because of the taxi squad or something like that. We don't know that, right? But it all depends on, like, obviously the pandemic, right, which seems to have an effect on everything right now. So if the AHL isn't playing, if the OHL isn't playing, right? Like, Nick Robertson needs a place to play. Do they send him to Europe? We don't, like, again, we don't know, right? I think Nick Robertson had a hell of a series against Columbus. But again, it's only 5 games,
Yeah.
right? Like, what did you guys think of Makhayev's? Is Makhayev guaranteed a roster spot? I thought he was awful against Columbus. What did you guys think?
I think he wasn't recovered from his injury. I'm willing to give benefit of the doubt.
He had like 9 months to recover.
It's not like recovery physically and recovering being able to play an NHL game is two completely different monsters. It's a pretty significant injury. Like what was a cut across the wrist?
It was sliced his vein. I don't want to come across as saying that I didn't think the injury was serious. I just think that, like, taking his play for what it was, face value, like, he was a non-factor in all facets of the game, right? He didn't produce any offense. He was not hard to play against. He wasn't able to show his speed, and like, the philosophical question is, how much stake do we, or how much thought or stake do we put into playing in a bubble with no fans in the middle of August? Like, how do we evaluate that, right? Like, Nick Robertson, how is his debut happening if he's debuting on Hockey Night in Canada on a Saturday night against the Habs rather than like Columbus with no fans in a bubble? You know what I mean? You have a training camp, all this stuff. Like, there's just so many different variables that were factoring into the play there. But if we're just taking it at face value, like, I thought Robertson was better than Mikheyev, right?
Yep.
I think Robertson is going to be a 30-goal scorer in the NHL. I think that highly of him. The moves that the Leafs made this year tell me as a person watching from the outside that they don't think that he's going to be a full-time NHLer next year. So
Robertson,
what is that? Yeah, signed.
I don't know if that's necessarily true.
Okay, sir. I'm not saying they won't give him a chance, but I'm saying, like, if you have Robertson penciled into your lineup, right? Why are you signing Jimmy Vesey at $900,000? Like, why is he taking?
You need depth. You absolutely need depth. And at the end of the day, Anthony, like, you also have to remember too. Look how many injuries Toronto went through this year.
Yeah, it was they were rabid.
I'm going to take my chances with the $700,000, and this is really no one's fault. Engvall showed a lot of promise when he got the contract. It sucks that we're kind of sitting here saying, we're kind of cap strapped, so I would like to see him move on. But, like, if they can get rid of Engvall, I'd be over the moon, and that's just because of the cap situation, really. But if you're bringing in Jimmy Vesey for $700K, like, I'm not going to say that has anything really negative to say about Robertson. I think that's more or less just, oh wow, this guy I'm pretty sure he was a first round pick, if I'm not mistaken. He was really, 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 really.
No, he was a highly touted college free agent. I forget what he got drafted by Nashville. He got drafted by Nashville, won the Hobey Baker at Harvard, and then if you guys remember, he was deciding between the Rangers and the Leafs. Like, that was like his.
Was that Nylander's year?
It was before the debut of Matthews. So the 16-17 season, VC was deciding like Leafs or Rangers. He ends up going Rangers route. And then there was that crazy tweet that Dreger said, "Oh, if the Leafs got VC,
they would have to trade Nylander.
Nylander is out." Like, okay. Yeah. Like, that would have been a disaster.
No, I get where you're coming from. I do. I just don't think that necessarily signing VC means that they don't trust Robertson. I mean, Robertson is a rookie, so you're not gonna put all your eggs in that basket, right? You're gonna sit there and say
that's fair. But then to back to my point, though. Sorry, Pat, to interrupt here, but back to my point about Robertson, right? Like that kid needs a place to play. It's not just for Robertson, like Sandin and Liljegren, right? Like Sandin's not penciled into the top 6 right now, right? They got that Lettinen guy who's looking fantastic in the KHL. They still got to sign Dermott. They got Bogosian. Like I get it. You need depth. Like obviously these moves signify that depth is a key was a key theme in their offseason, and they needed to acquire more players, more NHL players, because if they were in a situation again where Jake Muzzin's hurt and they had to put in Martin Marincin again, how many Leaf fans would have just been like, all right, we're done. Like Martin Marincin's going to last longer than the Toronto Maple Leafs hockey club. Like the team might move. You know what I mean? That's how crazy I think that their love for Marincin is. I'll never get it. I think he is an adequate 7th or 8th defenseman in the NHL. He should still never be playing on a cup contending team, even if you have injuries. So to that point, you still have Sandin that you need to get minutes for, and like if the AHL is not happening, these guys need to play somewhere. So are they going to go to Europe or wherever? Like, or are they going to just do a taxi squad thing, right? Like, I have no idea. But to your Engvall point as well, like that seems like it's going to be a cap dump, because I do think that although he showed promise like right at the beginning of Keefe's era,
he had a 12 games.
Yeah, he had a good 12 games, but then the last like 40 games he didn't score a goal. The only goal he scored was against David Ayres. So
what a goal, though.
Right. Yeah, it was.
But even just getting back to the original topic was the Thornton signing is, the fact that we're able to have these conversations, we weren't having these last season. And that really bodes well to the potential success of this team. We could, outside of the top 5, which is Hyman, Tavares, Matthews, Nylander, Marner, everyone else is a pencil. Like no one else is a pen on this roster. Like if you're mapping out a roster, those 5 are in for sure.
Up front. On the defense, you would lock in Brody Muzzin and Riley.
Yeah, but if you're looking at just the forward unit, the bottom 6 can have 9 different names, or 6 different names at any given night, and I think that it should bode well for. You're not going to get players that are going to come out and have a flat night, because they know if they have a flat night on a couple of occasions, they're out of the roster. And I think that you're going to start to feel that internal competition become the feel that this roster needs to actually begin to actually take that next step come playoffs.
Jason Spezza called it desperation.
Yeah.
Right?
There's nothing wrong with desperation. Nothing wrong with it. But you know what? I guess, it's been a really heated and often really good conversation we've had, gentlemen, this evening. And, I guess before we wrap up today's podcast, do you guys have any final thoughts as we stare down, what looks like a January 1st start or even a February 1st start for the next NHL season?
Yeah, for me, it's probably the storyline that I'm going to be following is Mackenzie Weegar in Florida. Don't quote me on this. I'm not sure if he's I think he filed for arbitration. I have no idea. I know his ask was $3 million a year. So, like, to me, I think he would just be a player that I'd be looking at to add to the top 4. The thing is, though, they would have to move Justin Hall. So again, another variable in that is that if there's a market for Justin Hall, right? So that's a storyline that I'll be following. I know Dubas doesn't. He said that he doesn't expect to make any more moves before the season starts, but that could just be him playing holding his cards close to himself. So overall, if they do stand pat, I think that there's an argument to be made that maybe they aren't as on paper, they don't look as offensively gifted or high flying Leafs, right? I don't think we're going to be calling them that anytime soon. They're actually got a little bit slower, but I do think that this team is more built for playoff hockey. So that's kind of the mantra that I'll be taking into the season if the puck drops with this roster.
Yeah, I'll agree with Anthony. I'll say that I do like the direction the team's going in. I think they are a little bit more balanced at this point, like throughout the whole entire roster. Um, I'll give Dubas some credit. You know, he's answered a couple questions. He's tried his best to fix holes that desperately needed to be fixed. I know he's mentioned that he probably doesn't want to make any more moves, but I would like to see him to move out a couple more guys. And if Mackenzie Weegar actually does become available, I really don't think that you should not make that move because you have Hall and Engvall tying you up with the cap that could go to Weegar. Like I think those are two guys that should be moved out if you have the opportunity to bring a guy like Weegar in, because then that just means, as Anthony said, a guy like Martin Brinson will never have to play for the Leafs again, which would be really nice to not have him as the seventh defenseman. But other than that, I do really enjoy where the Leafs are headed. Other than that, no, that's about it for me.
Well, gentlemen, it's been fun again. And we'll be catching up again shortly for next week's podcast. To all our listeners, thanks you again for your continued support. And don't forget to head over to our Twitter account for our contest this October, where you could win yourself a Manscaped prize pack. Thanks again, everyone. Cheers.